Oh, well, that was something I understood my entire existence. But that's because upon coming into this life, I didn't go through the same kind of forgetting experience that the vast majority of people intend on going through when they come into this life. So I was not cut off from the concept that one of the primary things you're opting into by coming into a physical incarnation is your family line. You're literally choosing to take all of it on. We could call that like the
So
OG
you kind of just came in. So you knew that from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I doubted why the hell I did it. but yeah.
Well, and how does that deal with this idea? How does that interplay with this idea of karma? So you're choosing this experience, you're choosing a family line, and then you also have this concept of karma.
I think I can make some sense to people by having them think about their individual lives. So let's look at an individual. Let's look at a woman in the Deep South who is raised like deeply Christian. And according to those deeply Christian rules, you have a certain life, you do a certain thing, you fit into a certain gender role, and you pick a certain partner. Now we can look at that and we can call that a choice when she's walking down the aisle towards this one person. And when she chooses to have that one role, we could call that a choice, but it's also not a choice. You see? It's a choice, not a choice. Because there's so much programming and so much prior information and prior influence that went into it. So are you with me so far? You can kind of understand that it's a choice, not a choice, because you're operating according to some programming. Okay, so if we understand that, then we can blow that up and think about this in terms of multiple lifetimes. The law of cause and effect is a very important thing to understand in this world. It's that when you take certain actions, you do certain things, that leads to certain outcomes. We could consider that a prior influence. And I like to sort of liken the cause and effect dynamic to rolling a bowling ball down a bowling alley. You've created a kind of a momentum that's going in a specific trajectory and it's going to end up in a certain place. So we do that whenever we take actions, make choices, anything. And that bowling ball doesn't just apply to this life. It applies to our consciousness itself, which comes in and out of incarnation. So we have rolled that bowling ball. At the same time, at any point in that process of being that bowling ball rolling towards a certain destination, we can still influence the trajectory. And that's where free will and choice comes into play. So it's like when we understand karma as it applies to multiple lifetimes, or karma as it applies to families, it's just think about that bowling ball that is rolling. Now, when we opt into a family, we are literally choosing to take on the trajectory and the momentum of that bowling ball. And for some of us, it's awful. We're literally looking at a bowling ball that's headed straight towards doom, basically, towards the shattering of families, towards abuse, towards all kinds of horrible things. And we're like, yeah, I think I'm going to do that. Not only for our own benefit, but for the benefit of the family line that we've come into. But it's not like, the only thing we're looking to do is to come into these terrible momentum cycles. We're also looking for positive momentum cycles. That applies greatly to our own personal expansion and why we pick into a certain family line for a certain life purpose that we have in mind. I mean, you can take myself, for example. The life purpose that I came in for was to be a spiritual leader of sorts. Now, to be a leader within the context of humanity, it benefits you greatly to come into a family line that has mastered oration. And so I would pick a political family line. By coming into a family line, you're coming into a deck of cards or a hand of cards. And those hands look very, very different for each person because what a family consciousness has encountered across time is so different. So you're looking at a hand that it's your choice how to play these hands, but some of those cards are super awesome. And some of those cards are not very awesome, but you have to figure out how to consciously play those cards. And that is what's in your hands. And it's a lot harder to play those cards if you don't even know what they are. Which is one reason why doing this research and diving into your genealogy and ancestry can give you so much of a bigger and more conscious picture of exactly what you're playing with in your hands.
So high level concept. Yeah, we have this purpose and intention for this lifetime. Many of us have no idea what that is.
Yep.
And part of the, I would say, equation is this whole family component that we opt into. And so, and that's there to help us in our mission, but also probably there to help us in the growth that we seek. And so what is where do we, now that we kind of have a basis of this idea, like what are the steps to us developing that understanding, and why is it important?
Why is it important? Oh my gosh. Well, if you look at the global activity right now within the human race, so much of what is demolishing us as a species and as a society are in fact ancestral patterns that we have not cleared. We're just not identifying them as that. We don't understand, for example, when we look at North Korea and what the current leader is doing today in the year 2000, whatever, in North Korea is absolutely the byproduct of ancestral traumas that have not been dealt with. And when you don't have ancestral traumas that are dealt with at a huge cultural level, you have an entire culture that's operating with these detrimental patterns. And are they going to influence the rest of the world? Absolutely. This is a web. Every single part of this web affects every other part of the web. So when I started to see, it's sort of the motivation for me doing this ancestral healing course that I did, when I started to see that these greater ancestral traumas were so much of the picture of where we're headed here to the negative, I was like, all right, it's very important to awaken people to this concept of ancestral healing. And if we can get enough individuals that are doing this, then it's a no-brainer that the totality of culture changes. It's just very hard for people to understand themselves in the bigger picture often. I have noticed that when you pass a certain point of population, most people believe that the governments themselves or the societies themselves are just above and beyond them, and they have no influence. They're like a drop of water in the ocean. And I really do wish that people understood that the implications of enough individuals tipping that scale is that the totality of the world changes. Human culture can't stay the same. Human business can't stay the same. Cultures can't stay the same. Everything changes. The whole face of the world changes. Human priorities change.